the Sinai revelation, prophecy to the nation of Israel, but in particular to Moshe Rabbeinu. We all stood there at Mount Sinai. The mountain was quaking. The earth had thundering and lightning. The shofar was sound. The smoke was seen. The fire was on top of the mountain. And we told Moshe Rabbeinu, die. That's enough. We can't hear anymore. We're just going out of our bodies. Our physical body cannot even, and our soul cannot absorb any further divine heights. Wow, wouldn't it be just great to remain on that divine height, on that high, that spiritual high? And now, after the following the Parshat Yitro, we come to a new Parsha called Mishpatim. And here, if we count the details of the commandments, the mitzvot in this Parsha, we come to Gan mitzvot. Can you repeat that? Gimel Nun. A garden. How much did you say numerically? 53 mitzvot. Gan. Nun is 50. Gimel is 3. One of the most detailed mitzvot of all of our parshiot. There happen to be approximately 24 positive mitzvot, 29 negative commandments. And we ask ourselves, what is it doing here? But I think the answer is going to be very clear to all of us. Roll up your sleeves. Wash or rinse the sweat on your eyebrow. We're getting to work. The Torah is not only this initial enthusiasm of spirituality, of receiving the 10 commandments, and we're actually hearing prophecy, but now we have to get into what we call the nitty-gritty. We're getting into the Mishpatim, the laws of Sinai, the laws by which the nation of God will be able to gear themselves, manage their lives to be the nation of God. In last week's Parsha, we hold that we received our national aim. We're going to be, quote, Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. We're gonna be a kingdom. We are a kingdom of priests to be serving God, and we're a holy nation. We are a sgula, a treasure from all the nations in the world. This aim, this divine content that we have, is unique so that we can live a divine way of life here on the planet of Earth. So we're now beginning our dive into the sea of details, into the actual details of godly life. But it first stems from our faith in God. In order to go ahead to start learning and studying and understanding all the mitzvot, it's all based upon our emunah, our faith. Some of you understood that from the first of the 10 commandments utterances that we studied last week, Rambam, Maimonides writes that it's a mitzvah to believe in God, a mitzvah to know God. On the other hand, Ramban, Nachmanides, argued. He said, no, it can't be one of the 613 mitzvot because it's a shoresh. It's a root. When you have the root, then you can branch out. It's not a mitzvah for belief. It's the basis of the entire Torah. Ramban Nachmanides writes in his comments on the book of mitzvot of Maimonides. It's the shoresh. It's the root of performing God's will. If we deepen our understanding and faith in God, then we can go ahead to wear tefillin, to keep our social, neighborly laws, the laws of torts and damages, and more. Therefore, the Torah will have to deal with all different situations of the Jewish people, even the weak situations of persons, of society, details that are going to be dealing with theft and murder, torts and damages, your animal caused damage, your property damage. So we're going to learn that the divine ideal of godliness in the world is demanding demanding a lot. From the time you wake up in the morning and you stretch your two hands up to the sky, and until you go to sleep, there are a lot of things involved. And therefore, we're almost ready to begin our voyage in Parshat Mishpatim. But first, let's read the first word. Ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the mishpatim that you're going to place before them. Before them, the oral Torah explains, before the court of Israel, commonly called in the Mishnah, Sanhedrin. In the language of the Torah, Shoftim. Very good. We have a portion in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, chapter 14, something like that, correct? Called Shoftim. Can you repeat that word? Shoftim. But our parsha is called Mishpatim. Why is our parsha called Mishpatim? Because it's going to be dealing with the obligations incumbent on the Shoftim, on the Dayanim, on the judges, that they must supervise, they must judge in all the cases. And therefore, in this special parsha that we said is comprised of 53 commandments, 53 mitzvot, it's going to basically be dealing with the laws of, listen to this in Hebrew, nizikim, damages, dinei mamanot, the laws of monetary matters. And therefore, there are a lot of details. No, in our 4 hours this week, we're not going to be able to cover too much. We're going to try to qualitatively cover some basic things. A lot is going to have to be studied by you, the student, including myself, in our spare time. I know you have to sleep a few hours at night. In your spare time, in the evening, in the early morning, with Rashi, of course. Let me just give you a very special coaching element. Rashi, almost throughout this parsha, because it deals with so many legal, halachic matters, is finding himself often quoting the Talmud on these halachic matters. Some of it may seem to be very difficult to understand because you're not into this Talmud matter yet. You're not into the context of the Talmud matter. Read Rashi. You understood 70%? Fantastic. You understood 40%? Also good. You didn't understand anything? Go on. Don't stop. My gentlemen, the first issue of laws that you must put before them, the judges, talks about the purchase of a Hebrew slave. Let's just read it first in the text. Ki tikneh eved ivri, when you shall buy a Hebrew servant, verse 2 of chapter 21. Sheish shanim yavod. He's going to work for how many years? And I'm adding 6 only will be the maximum to work for his Jewish master. Uvashviyit, but in the 7th year, yetzei lachofshi chinam. He's going to go free. Im begapo yavo, if he came in by himself, meaning unmarried, I'll get your question momentarily. Begapo yetzei, then when he's freed, I'm adding the words, he shall be freed by himself. However, im baal ishahu, if he is a baal, what is a baal? Return. Thomas, can you just help the gentleman next to you, please, again? Im baal ishahu, if he is a what? A husband of a woman, v'yatza ishto imo. 1 second. Then his wife will also leave in the 7th year. Wife, who talked about a wife coming in. Rather, we hear from here that if someone did become a Jewish slave and he was married, it's going to be incumbent upon the owner, the buyer of the servant, to support as well Mrs. Servant. Okay? Mrs. Servant. I'm stopping with the first 3 psukim, and I want to explain the following, then be very happy to hear questions. But maybe just short questions from you that it's aroused to you, Moshe?
It says the 7th year. Is that reference to the Shemitah year?
Excellent question. Other questions?
Yes. I forgot. Sorry.
It's okay. Did you kick him under the table? Maybe we'll remember.
It's kind of a longer...
Okay. Gentlemen, the Torah here is talking about a weakness in the society of the Jewish people. There are 2 ways that a Jewish man can lose most of his independence. One is if he's impoverished, and for economic reasons, he decides to go onto the slave market and to sell himself. Then his economic worry of livelihood is vanished, but he is the servant. He has to work in his profession for that person. All the proceeds, all the income that's coming in will go to the owner, the Jewish owner, of course, that's buying him. That's not the Hebrew servant that we're talking about. We're talking about a Hebrew servant that stole. Talking about a Jew that stole money, property. And he was found guilty by the court of Israel based upon two witnesses that appears later in the context of the Chumash. And someone may know, like you're saying, Thomas, the Torah penalty for stealing or theft is
Pay back the double.
very good, kaful, to pay double. In the event that he cannot pay from whom he stole, it's incumbent upon him to sell himself. Beit Din, in fact, will sell him in order so that he can pay back the monies. In the event that he doesn't pay back the monies, he can only work for 6 years and 6 years only. We'll ask ourselves, why? Why in the 7th year is he going free? And first, to immediately answer the question that Moshe asked so well, that the Talmud answers your question, no, we're not talking about the sabbatical year. We're just talking about the 7th year. By the way, if the Yovel year, the Jubilee year, appears first, as the Talmud explains in Masechet Kiddushin, that's correct, then he will also be freed from slavery. We ask ourselves, why of all issues, subjects, topics, is the Torah getting into this matter first? Why? Why is it this first? I saw an answer, and together I want to explain also the idea of 7 that we're talking about here. First and foremost, we're talking about social matters, man and society. Even if a person will be sold as a slave, he has rights. The Torah is concerned with the rights of each and every Jew, even if they've bottomed out, if they reach one of the lowest areas. No, this Hebrew servant's not going to be what we call in modern day Hebrew a smartut, a shmata. He's not going to be a rag. He's not going to be exploited. The baby may pee-pee and kaki on the floor, go pick it up. No, that's not a servant, as the Rambam explains based on the Talmud. He has dignity, he has respect, he's just lost his economic ability to provide for his home. And therefore, as Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch explains in his commentary, God is reminding us and realizing what are the principles of rights, of humanness, which it demands even for a slave. He too has the respect and the dignity of a human being. And therefore, the Torah starts off with this criminal that stole, that doesn't have the ability to pay back double, and therefore he is going to be sold by the Beit Din. Regarding the 7 years, the Ramban explains, when we learn in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, which is like a repetition of parts of the Chumash, there we're reminded that Shabbat, the Torah says, is remembering the exodus of Egypt. You should remember that you were a servant in the land of Mitzrayim, and who redeemed you? God redeemed you. Therefore, a servant here too, after stealing, he will be relieved, freed in the 7th year, that we should remember as well, Yetziat Mitzrayim, that God took us out as servants and did not allow us to continue to be servants. Therefore, there's an aspect here that being freed in the 7th year is remembering God who took us out of Mitzrayim, and also God that created the world in 6 days, and only in 6th day. And in the 7th day, we are really free men, not doing works or inventions or creations of the 6 days. So not only is the 7th year remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim, as the Torah states in the book of Deuteronomy, but it's also remembering the act of creation. Wow. Therefore, the Nachmanides says, this mitzvah is so worthy that it should be preceding all other mitzvot in the Parsha, to talk about the dignity the humanness that we have to give still to avadim, even to these criminals, yet only to work 6 years. You are not, God told you, and it appears at the end of Vayikra, Ki li avadim, part of a pasuk. Can you please translate, Mr. Resnick? Ki, not here. Ki li avadim, it says in Vay, for me you shall be avadim, servants. The Talmud says, be servants to me, and don't be servants to you, men, who have to be servants also to God. In other words, God is telling us, I don't want you to be servants. I don't like that. I want you to be independent. I want you to take care of yourself, your families, for your own livelihood. Okay? Now you did not, you stole, you didn't overcome your Yetzer Hara. This is going to be the penalty, but you're not going to be servants forever. And therefore, comes the 7th year, you shall be released. Mr. Moshe?
So, like, from the way you're describing this, it sounds less like, as we would say, as an American would think of as slavery, but rather indentured servitude or a contract labor agreement or something like that.
That's right. A servitude is not a smartut. Can you say that in Yiddish?
Smartuis?
Shmata. I caught you, Moshe. You usually know all these Yiddish words from your grandparents, huh? So, smartut is a rag. He's not a rag. He's dignified.
We call that a tchotchke.
Okay, so this is part of the first section. You should know that the owner that buys him, in the event that he is married and has children, who will be supporting the wife and the children? The owner. That's what it says here at the end of verse 3. Im bali shahu, if he is a husband to a Jewish wife, viatza ishto imo, then the wife will come out. Who mentioned the wife going into slavery? Answer, anyone that buys an Eved Ivri. What is he? Eved Ivri, a Hebrew servant. Then the owner is obligated in supporting the woman. Rashi brings it, it's understood from these psukim. Mr. Hirsch.
So I was reading the art scroll Danach yesterday during the what's it called, Haftarah on Shabbat.
Yes, sir.
It said that during the Oval year, in the commentary, if the servant wants to stay with the master.
Oh, we're going to read it shortly. Let's read it. In the meantime, in verse 4, 1 second, Ariel, the owner has the ability, if he has a non-Jewish servant, woman, a woman in her efforts to become a Gioret, decided to sell herself, a non-Jewish woman decided to sell herself into slavery. She goes to the mikveh, and she becomes now a level of a shifcha kinanit, a non-Jewish maidservant. She has certain mitzvot that she has to keep. Until she is freed, she's not yet a whole, bona fide Jewish woman. Once she is freed, she is a Jewish woman, a complete Jewish woman. She'll go probably into the mikveh for the sake of complete gior. But the owner, who's now bought you financially, he can produce children. By handing over to you the married slave, this non-Jewish servant woman, called in the language of the Mishnah, Shifcha Kenanit, that she's en route to becoming a Gioret, a full-fledged converted woman. And that's what the Torah is talking about in verse 4. And of course, the children will solely belong to the owner. Okay? Solely belong. A lot of us, it's very hard to fathom this matter or digest this matter, because once upon a time, in biblical times, and of course in many places in the world until a few hundred years ago, there was a slave market. In most places in the world, it does no longer exist. And therefore, it's hard for us to have empathy or sympathy in this matter, but we can't learn Torah right now with our emotions. We have to learn Torah with the hardcore intellect of understanding that He's the boss. If we've accepted His faith, these are the mitzvot. Now, a lot of the mitzvot, almost all the commandments that God gives us in the Torah, what does not appear in its side? The reason. Ta'amei mitzvot, the reasoning behind the mitzvot. Most of the commandments do not have the reasoning behind things. And it's beyond man. Man can begin to tax himself and try to investigate and say, what could we understand could be this? That's the masterwork of the author called Sefer HaChinuch, that he has enumerated the mitzvot according to the portions of the week. What could the scholars of Israel decide that could be the reasoning behind it? Most of our cases we're not going to get into. We don't have the time for that. But right now we're accepting these mitzvot. We hope we're accepting them. Today we don't have the slave laws, unfortunately, because it's dependent upon what Mr. Hirsch talked about. What's that 50th year called in Hebrew? Yovel. We're going to get to that in a moment, because let's read verse 5. V'im amor yomar ha'eved. And if the Eved, the Jewish servant, shall say, Ahafti, follow the reading, Ariel, Ahafti et Adoni. I love my Adon, et Ishti, my wife, V'et Banai, and my offspring, my children. Lo Eitze Chofshi. I don't want to go out and have chofesh. What does chofesh mean? Freedom. Chofshi, my freedom. HaChofesh sheli. What is this talking about? What is he coming saying? He loves his wife? Of course he loves his wife and children. No. We're talking about the non-Jewish maidservant that was given to him in order to produce offspring, children, for the owner. If the servant says, I don't want my freedom, he's going against the rules of the Torah. The Torah says you should want your freedom. You should want your independence. Or you don't want it? Now let's see if there's a possibly understood penalty. Pasuk 6, Vav, V'gisho Adonav el ha'Elohim. Here, Elohim does not mean it's not God. Elohim is a word for Dayanim. Did you know that, Ariel? No. I knew I can teach you something. Elohim is not God here. Elohim is a code word in the written Torah for judges. You're going to bring him to the court of Israel. V'gisho el adelet, and you'll bring him close to the delet, the door. Oh, el mezuzah. Mr. Hirsch, can you point to everyone what is a mezuzah? How many mezuzot are in that door? By that door?
One.
Incorrect statement.
There's 3.
No.
4. 5.
Come on, Moshe. How many? What is a mezuzah?
It's the doorpost.
It's a doorpost. And you thought the mezuzah is the thing that you kiss once in a while, that you're in love with God and you kiss his name.
No, there's 3. There's the one that's
No, that's a lentil, sir. That's a lentil. That's a Mushkoff.
Thank you, I'm not hungry.
It's a Mushkoff. Where did we see the word Mushkoff in the Exodus of Egypt quickly?
We're talking about the clouds.
No.
The powder of the sea?
Oh, no,
No.
blood on the...
We were in the smearing business, remember? We took the blood of the Paschal offering and the Brit Milah according to the Midrash, and we smeared one mezuzah and another mezuzah and the Mushkoff. Repeat it.
Mushkoff.
And 2 mezuzot. You take this Eved Ivri, and when he says, I don't want my freedom, the 7th year is about to come, and you bring him close to the delet or the mezuzah, Viratza adonavet ozno bar martzea. You take a martzea, which clips a hole in your ear, in the ear, and there's a hole made in the ozen. Ozen is ear of the servant, and then it says vavado leolam. He's a servant leolam. As you know, the Chumash is a code system. The Chumash is brief, vague, unclear. Comes the oral Torah. Remember, we received at Sinai, Mr. Resnick, how many Torot?
2.
I see you passed the optometry test, right? The one is called the Torah Sheh Bich. Okay, Baal Peh, the oral Torah. And the other is called the Torah. Help him out. No, come on. Who can say the word? Shebichtav. That's in written. Repeat the 2 Torot. Be'al peh. We have the oral and the written Torah. The written and the oral Torah. The oral Torah explains the word le'olam, forever, until which year, Mr. Hirsch? Thank you. We're going to learn in Vayikra, that's correct, chapter 25, in about 2 months from now. No, I'm sorry, 3 months from now at least. The laws of servants and the laws of Shemitah. And there, we're going to learn that after we count the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, the 7th year, Dave, do you hear it? The 7th year, David. When we count that 7 times, would you please tell everyone your good your arithmetic? There you go. I know you can do it. 49. The year after is year number, and that's called, like Hirsch says, the Yovel year. The actually commonly called in Latin or English, the Jubilee year. Let's talk in Hebrew, Yovel. Social and economic freedom. All properties that you bought from this guy, from this tribe, come back to you, the original seller, owner, in the 50th year. All slaves that were enslaved return home. There's social and economic equality in the year called in Hebrew, Yovel. Mr. David Adler, could you please spell it for everyone?
Yud Vav Lamed? No.
Yovel.
Yud Aleph?
You were right in the beginning. Yud Vav.
Yud Vav, Bet, Lamed.
Wow, Ariel, you're strong. Kol hakavod.
I just realized that Jubilee originates
from
Yovel.
There you go. There you go.
But Jubilee probably comes from Greek. But...
I would assume so, like many of these matters. My dear friends, the Eved Ivri, when he claims he doesn't want to leave his master, his Shifcha Kananit, that non-Jewish maidservant, and the kids that they had from there, we take him next to the door. We take him next to the mezuzah, and where the door hits or closes, we take his right ear as it learned from the oral Torah, and we say, your ear that heard at Mount Sinai, Vayikra 25. No, not here. Vayikra, Leviticus 25. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. That for me, the children of Israel are to be avadim, servants. And the Talmud says, I want you to be servants to me and not to man who is servants. And you didn't want to do it? The same ear that heard at Sinai, the Talmud says, Rashi brings this Talmudic passage, I want that ear to have a hole in it. No, not to put an earring in his hole, in his ear, but to put a blemish in his body. The ear that has to be attentive to his Rebbe, to his teacher, to God, is now going to be pierced. So that is the answer to your good question, Hirsch, that you asked 10 minutes ago. When it says, Va'avadoni shall serve, and what's the last word of the pasuk, please? Le'olam, forever. It means to the world until the year called, Mr. Resnick?
Yovel.
Yovel, the year of the Yovel. Questions? Until now, gentlemen.
So that are not forbidden for the Jews, the Canaanite women?
A regular Jewish man should not have relations or marry, of course, a non-Jewish woman. At the time that she is a servant to a Jewish family, she's not yet fully fledged woman. She's under the ownership of the Adon, of the master. So, yes, sir?
My question's probably going to be stupid and irrelevant, but Oxford says that Yovel in Hebrew means a ram's horn trumpet, a shofar.
Excellent. What this gentleman is bringing is a difference of opinion between Ramban and the Rashbam there in Vayikra 25, if I'm not mistaken. Yovel is a horn, as it's understood from Masechet Rosh Hashanah, chapter 1 or 2, I forgot exactly. It's no doubt that it's a horn. But the Ramban argues from the word lehovil, to lead out to his freedom. And therefore, there are those that you explain that the word yovel is not just a horn, but rather it's different. It's to lead lehovil. For instance, what is it called? Rivers, or let's say rivers.
Delta.
They have channels going out. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Delta.
Yeah.
Is it a word channel?
Yeah.
You lived in the woods over there, right?
Yeah.
They have channels that go out. That would be like yovelot. I think they call them modern day Hebrew. These are yovelim, whatever. Areas of water that lead out to different directions. I think, therefore, that's what the Ramban or Rashbam, excuse me, I don't remember exactly which of the great Rishonim, he says that there on Vayikra 25. Okay, so it goes along with what you want to say, sir. Okay, is it the horn? Is it because we're sounding the shofar? Are you aware of that? In the 50th year, we're getting off the topic. The Torah in Vayikra 25 talks about counting the 7 years and then blowing the shofar in year number 50 on Yom Kippur in the court of Israel. And that's like a declaration. It's a Torah mitzvah to blow the shofar on Yom Kippur, the 50th year. And then the Mishnah, Masechet Rosh Hashanah, talks about similarities between Rosh Hashanah every year and Yom Kippur once in 50 years, what similar or differences there are. So, without a doubt, the Yovel there is also a shofar, but it could also mean the result of the Yovel, meaning freedom. Go out to them. Okay. I'm skipping a few psukim now after learning about the laws of a unfortunate situation. A man sells his bat, his daughter. When, until what age can he sell his daughter?
12.
Until she's 12, not including 12, because once she is 12 years old, the oral Torah explains to us that she's her own entity, not under the ownership, so to speak, of the Abba. So I'm not going to get into all the laws. I want to pick some other things. When the Torah in verse 7 talks about a father selling his daughter as an amma. Do you see the word aleph mem? Please see it in Hebrew in verse 7. V'chim kori should be told le'ama. Amma means a female slave. Here, we're talking about a father that's impoverished. Do you hear that? Only if he's impoverished, cannot support her, can he theoretically sell her to a fellow Jew. He gets the monies. Listen to this. The monies are potentially designated to the owner that's buying her or to the son of the owner for what's called kesef kiddushin. Thomas, repeat that term. Kesef kiddushin. Kiddushin monies. What am I referring to? Marriage monies. A man can marry a Jewish woman by giving her money. It's one of the 3 ways that a Jewish man can acquire a Jewish woman. These monies are potentially kiddushin monies, meaning, let's say, let's talk about David Adler and Ariel. You sold, unfortunately, it was a terrible situation of any money. You sold your 11-year-old daughter to this owner, Mr. Ariel. Come on, play along with us. Okay, there you go. And Ariel bought it, and he has a 14-year-old son already, and she's only 10 years old. Maybe in 2 years he'll be 16 or 18, whatever. The monies that you give him are potential monies that either you may marry this girl,
Me? No, my son.
or your son. One of the two. Come on, man, play along. And that's the possibility of these monies, as the Torah says. In the event that he doesn't want, and so on and so forth, he has to free her. That's all I wanted to share you right now about. There's so much to learn. By the way, all of this in the oral Torah will appear in a tractate Masechet called Kiddushin. Can you repeat that? A lot of the laws of Eved Ivri, a Hebrew servant, Amma Ivriya, a Jewish woman servant, appear there in Masechet Kiddushin, Thomas.
The question is, for acquire woman, one term is with money, the other is
Kesef Shtar Ubia. The Mishnah says, chapter 1, Mishnah 1, a man acquire wisdom either through money, shtar, a note, or marital relations. Okay? Let's now go to another weakness, and that is murder. Pasuk Yud Bet, verse 12. Pasuk Yud Bet. Here we see already at the beginning of the Mishpatim all the weaknesses of society, whether it is stealing, inability to provide yourself. Moshe, can you find the place, please? Yud Bet, verse 12. And now we talk about the unfortunate thing called murder. I want to ask Moshe to read this pasuk correctly, and I want to see where he stops. It's a verse which is very short, 5 words. I want to see where he puts a comma and where he doesn't. Please read it for us.
Makei ish vamet mot yumat.
Okay. It's very hard for all of us to discern where he put a comma or not, because he's breathing in between each and every word almost.
I'm trying to use it tough, just so the right
Okay.
understand.
Makei ish. How do you read it? How is it properly read? Where you would put a pause there, Mr. Adler?
I will pause after Vamet.
Beautiful. Makei ish vamet. Then, I'm adding the word then. Mot yumat. Look at me, please. Makei ish, someone that lakot, that struck a man, and what happened? Vamet. He died. In that case, mot yumat, namely capital punishment for someone that kills a fellow Jew here. Don't leave the room, Hirsch, because we have yet to learn all of the oral Torah. You cannot punish in the court of Israel. Okay, Ariel and David, please warn this gentleman not to strike Hirsch and kill him. Would you please give him a warning? Let me hear the proper warning, that if you do kill him, tell him. And if you do, what's going to be his penalty? You're going to die. Why is that the type of azhara? Azhara. Or a better word is called hatra'ah, to warn, to forewarn. Hatra'ah. Sorry for my poor penmanship. You, the court of Israel, later we learn psukim, and of course it's in the oral Torah, cannot punish unless you were intentionally doing the violation. Do you hear what I just said? How do we differentiate or discern if a person is mistakenly killing someone or he is intentionally killing someone? Come along these two fellow Jews, and they love Yaakov Resnick. And they say, Yaakov, we love you. Please overcome your Yetzer Hara. Don't kill Hirsch. Because if you do kill Hirsch, then you're going to be obligated. Mita, death. Not him, a different Yaakov. What?
How would he be killed?
Oh, 1 second. Yeah, we'll get to that piece of it. We'll get to that part of this deal here in a moment. Do you see what he's interested in?
Yes.
No, with friends like this, you don't need enemies, right? Yaakov. Do you understand what we just added, which is not written here? The court of Israel will not be able to indict, thank you, unless there was a hatra by 2 witnesses. Not only does there have to be a warning, but there has to be witnessing the matter. These 2 or someone else. And those 2 are going to be brought to the court of Israel, to the court of capital punishment of more than of 23 or more, if I'm not mistaken. And they're going to interrogate everyone. Where were you? You saw this? We're going to interrogate each and every one. Where were you on the day of the 13th at 2 in the afternoon? If they're interrogated and their testimony doesn't come exactly what it's supposed to be, then it's going to be wiped away. In any event, hatra, warning, edut, testimony. You with me? Edut, testimony. And only after forewarning and testimony in court, after the court is cross-examining, after the witnesses and that, only then can the court issue a death penalty. My dear friends, Rabbi Akiva said about the courts of Israel. If they would be able successfully to bring about the execution of capital punishment once in 70 years, the Talmud says that he would call it a hanging court. In other words, the ability for the court of Israel to execute someone in capital punishment is not easy, but rather very, very hard. The Torah, God loves the Jewish people, each and every person, and it has to be so clear that he really did this capital offense that obligates death. We'll learn, when you're going to be learning in your Mishnah, you hope you're starting to learn Mishnayot, you'll get up to a Mishnah called the Mishnah of Sanhedrin. What is it called?
Sanhedrin.
Of which of the 6 orders does it appear?
Yeah.
That's correct, Nezikim, damages. And there, chapter 6, Mishnah 1, the Mishnah tells us, you see, Arba mitot beitin. There are 4 different death penalties of the court of Israel. And the Mishnah enumerates them from most severe to least severe. You're going to say, what does it matter? You're going to die, you die. No, there could be more pain. Skila, stoning, which is being thrown off a 2-story house. Sreifa, burning lead in your throat. Skila, sreifa, hereg, being killed with a sword. And herek, which is strangulation. Can you pronounce it again?
Strangulation?
No, in Hebrew. Chenek. Chenek is part. Chenek. Okay, so, stam mita. What did I just say?
2.
Stam mita. Say it. An unspecified death penalty in the Torah. It doesn't say which death penalty for killing it is. Stam mita is hereg, nachon? 1 second, did I just forget? Okay, I think is hereg, is number 3. In other words, there are going to be death penalties that are specified. But if it's not specified, that's the klal of the Talmud. Stam mita, meaning an unspecified death penalty, is hereg, to be killed by the sword of the court. So here, we're talking about someone, God forbid, killed someone. It was with 2 witnesses warning, there was testimony, the court accepted it, and therefore will be put to death. Mot yumat. You read it very well. Your question, Yaakov Resnick.
I have like a floating thought, but I want you to connect to this.
Let me just put my feet on the floor, and just in case I don't fly away from with your floating
I
thought.
remember like you're allowed to kill if it's someone's like a road death.
Right.
How does that apply to this?
It doesn't.
Okay.
You're right. It could apply, but it's not mentioned here. Very good. It's not mentioned here. Here is, we're going to talk about it in Bamidbar, at the end of the book of Bamidbar. And you know what? We're going to talk about it really in the next pasuk, indirectly. I'm reading the next pasuk. Everyone follow, please, verse 13.
That's a relevant question.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're thinking very well. So it wasn't floating, your feet are on the ground. Verse 13. Vasher lo tzada. I'm adding in the case that he did not ambush him. Meaning, Moshe, I want you to be with me in the psukim, please. Vasher lo tzada. He wasn't, by the way, hunting is one of the 39 melachot. Hunting is one of the 39 melachot, prohibited works of Shabbat. Yes? In modern day Hebrew and the Mishnah language in Hebrew, tzeidah, latzud, to hunt. A tzayad is a hunter. Who is considered a hunter in Book of Bereshit? Esav. So this word would appear there as well, or formation of the same word. Follow the Hebrew text, please, in verse 13. Vasher lo tzada. I'm adding the word in the case that he was not hunting him, he was not ambushing him, or what is it called in English terms? Premeditated. Is that the word premeditated, sir? Vasher lo tzada. If he wasn't hunting him down, va'elohim ina liyado. However, the God, he opportune this situation. I'm stopping here. You see the guy sitting next to you? You see the guy sitting next to you? He killed Reuven the other day. But you know what wasn't in existence? There was either no forewarning or there was no. Who got off the hook? The guy next to you there. He got off the hook. He couldn't be killed. Now, the He couldn't be killed
By the court.
by the court. Another guy, Shimon, killed someone. Premeditated murder. He really deserves, hello, death, capital punishment. But there were no witnesses either. I'm sorry. So one guy that killed unintentionally, meets someone else that killed intentionally. Now, do you know later on from the Torah, if you kill unintentionally, where do you go run to? Where do you live for the rest of your life until the Kohen Gadol passes away? What is it called? We learned it in Tanakh, in fact.
Yeah, one of the six
Cities of refugees.
Refuge. In Hebrew, Ir Miklat. Can you repeat that?
You're me glad.
What is an Ir Miklat?
So your refuge.
What is the Ministry of Absorption? Misara Klita. Liklot. Miklat. Yes? Now, if this is the case here that Torah is talking about, where a guy that didn't meditate murder, but didn't go, there were no witnesses, therefore he did not exile. There too is, if that was the case where there were not two witnesses, and therefore no one can testify that he killed accidentally, he's walking around, he's climbing up a ladder, and who happens to be under the ladder? Another guy that did premeditated murder, but now there were no witnesses either, and the guy on top falls on the guy down below and he kills him. That's the case here. V'asher lo tzada, in a case where you did not meditate, murder, premeditate murder. Ve'elokim ina liyado, and God opportuned the situation. What did you do? You fell off the ladder, you killed someone underneath. You hear what I'm saying? Gentlemen, Chevra, I want you to be with me. Hirsch and Moshe. Be with me, please. V'samti lecha makom, I'm going to place for you a makom, asher yanu shama, what Mr. Resnick asked about. I'm going to make a place for you called Ir Miklat, so that you can lanus, to flee there. Okay? The Torah here is telling us a bit in piece of the subject called murder b'shogeg. Retzach b'shogeg. B'shogeg means unplanned or not premeditated murder. Not unintentional murder. The Torah will tell us elsewhere.
Rob, is it unintentional or is it spur of the moment?
No, you fell off a ladder and you killed someone underneath.
Oh, okay. That'd be manslaughter.
That's called Rotzeach B'Shogeg. Rotzeach, a murder, B'Shogeg, meaning with no intent.
Manslaughter.
B'Shogeg.
So
You see it?
at this
A
point,
Rotzeach B'Shogeg, the Torah in a later place says, he has the ability to run away from the brother of this deceased who's hot-headed. He's going to take his gun and he might kill you. He won't be able to control himself. He's hot-headed. He's angry. If you can make it to the Ir Miklat, how many did we learn are going to be how many Arei Miklat are there going to be?
6.
3 on
on
east side, 3 on.
3 on the west
West
side.
side.
We're not talking about New York City, right? 3 on the east side, 3 on the west side. Let me see your smile. There you go. 3 on the east side, 3 on the west side. But there's another 42 cities of Levium as well. You should know that if the Rotzeach B'Shogeg runs there, he's safe. So the Torah has taught us in 2 different psukim: manslaughter, premeditated murder. He's obligated death penalty, and the second case could be a case of Rotzeach B'Shogeg, a murderer, unintentionally. He has the ability lanus shama. Look at this. You can't learn written Torah without oral Torah. What does Shama mean? You ran there. Where is there? We look at the Torah as one complete essence. You can't learn Torah like you right now at the university campus, and you're taking a knife and you're dissecting in the laboratory this piece and that piece and examining it. We can't learn Torah by looking at one pasuk only. We have to see the entire Torah. Like King David says in Psalms, Torah Hashem Timimah. The Torah of God is complete, it's perfect. What is Shama? In another place, the Torah talks about the 6 cities of refuge. Whereas, if we're going to end we're going to have to end our learning here. Hashem, I'm going to give you a break. So, gentlemen, we plan to continue, same time, Same place tomorrow. Either be here or be a circle, right? And we'll continue from Pasuk 14, God willing, tomorrow. Shalom, have a great day.